If you struggle with motivation, focus, or procrastination, or you find yourself feeling mentally flat or burned out, dopamine is very likely a part of the picture. This is especially true in ADHD, but it also shows up in depression and chronic burnout. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 evidence-based ways to support dopamine naturally. I'm Dr. Dan Sullivan. I'm a licensed naturopathic medical doctor, a certified functional medicine practitioner, and I also have ADHD myself. On this channel, I focus on evidence-based root cause education to help you understand how brain chemistry, lifestyle, and physiology shape focus, motivation, and mental health. Before we talk about ways to support dopamine, it's important to clarify what dopamine actually does because it's often misunderstood. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. It's the neurotransmitter most closely tied to motivation, effort, reward anticipation, and follow-through. It helps the brain decide what's worth doing, how much energy to apply, and whether a task feels engaging or exhausting. In ADHD, dopamine signaling tends to be lower or less efficient, particularly in brain regions responsible for attention, motivation, and executive function. This is why tasks that are boring, repetitive, or have delayed rewards can feel disproportionately difficult even when someone genuinely wants to do them. It's not a lack of willpower, it's a neurochemical mismatch. This same dopamine pattern also shows up in depression, chronic stress, and burnout. People often describe feeling unmotivated, flat, disconnected, or stuck, not because they don't care, but because the brain's reward and effort systems aren't firing normally. This is where many people go wrong. They try to stimulate dopamine with caffeine, sugar, scrolling, or constant novelty. That may create short-term relief, but over time it can negatively impact motivation and focus. What we want instead is to support dopamine regulation, helping the brain produce, release, and respond to dopamine more effectively over time. The strategies in this video aren't about quick hits or hacks. They're about strengthening the system so motivation, focus, and follow-through become more reliable. With that foundation in mind, let's talk about the first and most powerful way to support dopamine naturally, and that is exercise. Physical activity increases dopamine release and improves how responsive the brain is to dopamine over time. That matters because dopamine isn't just about feeling good, it's about motivation, initiation, and follow-through. These are the exact areas that tend to be most challenging in ADHD, in chronic stress, burnout, and depression. What makes exercise especially powerful is that it doesn't just create a short-term boost. Regular movement improves dopamine signaling efficiency, meaning tasks feel more doable, effort feels less draining, and procrastination becomes easier to overcome. Not because of sheer willpower, but because the brain's reward and effort systems are functioning more effectively. This is why exercise is so consistently helpful for focus and executive function. Many people notice that on days they move their body, it's easier to start tasks, to stay engaged, and to recover from distraction. Emotional regulation also tends to improve because dopamine and stress regulation are closely linked. Both aerobic exercise like walking, running, cycling, or swimming, and resistance training have both been shown to support dopamine. You don't need extreme workouts for this to work. Consistency matters far more than intensity. Even 20 or 30 minutes of moderate movement can meaningfully support motivation and focus. Exercise also helps to regulate cortisol and other stress hormones. When stress levels are lower, dopamine signaling works more efficiently. That's one reason exercise can improve motivation and attention well beyond the workout itself. For people who struggle with procrastination, this is often one of the most overlooked tools. Movement primes the brain for action. It reduces mental friction and increases the likelihood that effort feels rewarding instead of overwhelming. The second way to support dopamine naturally is meditation, particularly practices that involve focused attention. Meditation isn't just about relaxation. Certain forms of meditation have been shown to increase dopamine release in the brain. One way I often explain this is that meditation is like exercise for your brain. Every time your attention drifts and you gently bring it back to your breath, that's like doing a bicep curl for your focus. The benefit doesn't come from never getting distracted, it actually comes from practicing the return. For people with ADHD, chronic stress, burnout, or depression, the brain is often pulled toward distraction, avoidance, or constant stimulation. Meditation trains the opposite skill, staying with one thing even when it's boring or when it's uncomfortable. Over time, this supports more stable dopamine signaling and makes effort feel less aversive. This is also where biofeedback tools can be incredibly helpful. I've personally used the Muse device for many years, and I've also used it with patients. Muse is a form of EEG-based biofeedback. It measures brain activity during meditation and gives you real-time feedback through sound that lets you know when your brain is calm versus distracted. What this does is take meditation out of the abstract. Instead of wondering, am I doing this right, you get immediate feedback. And for many people, especially those with ADHD, this makes meditation much easier to start and stick with. It also gamifies the process in a helpful way. You can see progress over time, track consistency, and turn meditation into something concrete rather than frustrating or vague. That sense of feedback and reward is especially supportive for dopamine regulation. This doesn't mean you need a device to benefit from meditation, but for people who struggle to sit still, to stay engaged, or feel like meditation just isn't working for them, biofeedback can significantly lower the barrier to entry. I'll include a link below if you want to explore Muse along with the discount code. It's a tool I've found genuinely helpful both personally and clinically. And the third way to support dopamine naturally is sunlight, particularly early day light exposure. Light is one of the most powerful regulators of brain chemistry. When light enters the eyes, especially in the morning, it sends signals directly to a small but critical structure in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. This area acts as the body's master clock. The SCN helps set your circadian rhythm, which then coordinates the timing of dopamine, cortisol, and melatonin throughout the day. When the system is aligned, dopamine rises when you need motivation, alertness, and focus, and melatonin rises later to support sleep. Morning light exposure helps to shift the brain out of nighttime mode and into daytime physiology. That transition is what supports drive, mental energy, and the ability to initiate tasks. When this signal is weak or inconsistent, dopamine signaling during the day tends to be more blunted. People often experience this as low motivation, brain fog, procrastination, or feeling flat, even if they're sleeping enough on paper. The issue isn't just sleep quantity, but circadian timing. Sunlight also supports vitamin D production, which plays a role in dopamine synthesis and receptor function. Low vitamin D levels are commonly associated with fatigue, low mood, and reduced motivation, patterns that overlap with ADHD, depression, and burnout. This is one reason symptoms often worsen during winter months or in people who spend most of their day indoors. The brain simply isn't receiving the light input it needs to regulate motivation and energy effectively. From a practical standpoint, this doesn't require anything extreme. Spending 10 to 20 minutes outside in the morning, ideally within the first hour of waking, can make a meaningful difference. And cloudy days still count. The goal is natural light exposure to the eyes, not staring at the sun, but just simply being outdoors. Consistent morning light helps anchor the circadian rhythm, supports healthier dopamine signaling during the day, and often improves sleep quality at night. Like the other strategies we've talked about, it's not a quick fix, it's a foundational input that makes motivation and focus feel more accessible over time. So to wrap this up, dopamine isn't something you force or hack, it's something you support. Regular movement, focused attention practices like meditation, and consistent light exposure all work by strengthening the brain's motivation and effort systems over time. When those systems are supported, focus feels more accessible, procrastination eases, and mental energy is more reliable. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing for more evidence-based root cause mental health education.